Hello, this is Kyle Simpson with Simpson Studios, and we are at part two of opening Cubase for the first time. And I'm just going to go over briefly just some of the basics of getting started with your first project. Now, what you're seeing is where we left off on the last video, where at the Steinberg Hub we selected an empty project. Where I was showing you earlier, you've got other options for pre-made templates if you were to go that direction. That's up to you. Me personally, I like to start from an empty slate. Sometimes all those audio tracks give all these EQs and plugins that I'm not too fond of, or they just don't work for whatever project I'm needing. So I always like to start from a fresh slate. And first thing I do is you've got multiple directions to create an audio track. That's obviously first things first, is to create an audio track. Now, you have two different ways. You can go to Project, Add Track, Audio. You can say Audio, Instrument, MIDI. You get all these tracks you can add. Or, me personally, because I guess it's just right here in the middle of the screen, I like to just right-click anywhere in this little box right here. You can right-click, say Add Audio Track. Now, sometimes by default, it's set to stereo. You definitely want that to be mono. 99% of what you do as an engineer in recording, unless you're bringing in a left and right channel for a synth, or some type of digital system that has a left and right, a stereo, you can go that route and go to a stereo if you'd like to, or if you're bringing in a stereo MP3 track or wave track, definitely select stereo. But as far as recording from nothing, starting fresh and recording, you want that to be a mono. This is your count, however many you're going to have. And then here's where you'll name the track. You don't have to name it. By default, it'll just name it as track 1, track 2, track 3, or you can name it from here. It's a good habit to have. Like for me, I'll say, yeah, we'll just put guitar. Hit enter or add track, pops right up. Now, there is an issue. It's off right now because I obviously use this software every day. I'm gonna add a few more tracks here. If you're starting up Cubase for the first time, or if you've just had this issue with it, I'll show you how to get rid of it. This little guy right here, this main button, which if you've ever had, worked with any type of DAW software before, you'll see that this is the record enable button. Now, by default with Cubase, it records on whatever track is selected. So if I'm my guitar player is sitting there recording guitar, and I'm multitasking, and I decide to jump down to this track, well, all of a sudden it's going to turn off recording there and bring it here. Well, that's not very useful in my opinion, and for what I do, that gets in the way, because then I just cut off his guitar recording. Let's turn that off, at least if that's something you feel is going to bother you. Go ahead and turn it off. That is up. For Windows, it's File, and there's Preferences somewhere here in this area. For Mac, it's you go to Cubase Pro, Preferences, and then right here, Project and Mix Console, you'll see these two boxes checked: Enable Record on Selected Audio Track and Enable Record on Selected MIDI Track. Let's turn those off. At least if you feel like it's going to get in the way, I would definitely insist on having those off. So let's remove these. Again, you can select multiple tracks, you can right click and do things to them, you can duplicate them, for me, I'm going to remove these and get those out of the way. Now, when you first start up a track and you name it, and whether you have this enabled or not, let's keep that turned off for now, because we're not ready yet. Over here in your inspector area is going to be all your options for this track. So you can click on the name, drop down, and here is your basic functions to get your track up and running. You have your main input, which is the most important, and you got your main output. by default, it's normally just going to be your main stereo out. Now, if you are creating a group track to, let's say you did a bunch of vocal tracks and you want them all to go into a group or an effects channel to have like reverb, like one reverb engine on all of the tracks, you can simply just click the stereo out and find that group channel where it's titled. Right now we're just going to keep it simple and keep it at stereo out. Now your input is your mono in. For me, it's mono in. You can see here I've got all 16 channels, or you could, a lot of times it might even be sitting at no bus. For guitar is normally input 13 on my board. So if you're running just like a 2-channel interface, it may just say mono in left. You'll drop it down, you'll just see 2 options, mono in left and mono in right, which makes things obviously a lot easier. Obviously you can figure out that, you know, your left input on your interface is going to be mono in left, and then same thing with the right. So, but if you're running a multi-channel interface, you know, there's 8 channels, 16, 32, 48, all these different ones, make sure you're selecting the right channel for the input of this track. So, as far as the rest of the tools, you got, you know, obviously your panning, which we'll keep in the center for now. Your musical and linear time-based toggle, which we will do. It's a great tool to have. That's a whole nother tutorial I'll show later on. Freeze option, again, this is a fantastic tool to have if you have a not so powerful computer. This freeze option is a lifesaver, and I'll do a video on that one. So that is your basics. Besides, you know, you got your mute, solo, read and write automations. Again, we'll do a video on automations. That's your basics for getting your track ready. Now, if you want to go to your inserts, inserts are where your main plugins are going to be. So let's take, for instance, I'm a big fan of the, let's say I do a lot of rock. So I've got the Toad and Forge amp, and I've placed the plugin. Let's say you're going to record rock guitar. I have placed the plugin into the insert. Now, if you're doing any EQing or want to do something special at the beginning, great, do that. You can grab and you can move around if you need to. Or if you need to bypass all the plugins, you can click that little blue guy, turn everything off, and then you just have a clean sound. Remember, everything you do here is in real-time effect. If it's on, it's running in real time. So technically you're recording a clean guitar sound, but as long as everything's blue, see, I can turn it off, but as long as everything's blue, you're going to hear the real-time sound coming out of this. So let's exit out of that. Let's take, for instance, you know, you're doing a guitar, a rock guitar, so you put your amp of choice there, and there's tons of amps. There's free ones, there's paid ones, there's all sorts of them. And I'm running waves. I'm going to head over here in my dynamics. Again, we're running mono, and it is extremely important. All of these plugins have a mono and stereo function. If you put a stereo on a mono track or mono on a stereo track, you're not going to get the results you want. So you have to make sure that it is running mono. Another thing to tell, if you're just trying to look real quick, let me create a stereo track. They made you a quick little guide if you have everything closed up and you're quickly doing things. There's a little circle. You see, actually put your mouse over. It says mono. Little circle. And then on stereo track, there's 2 circles. Put it over. It says stereo. So in case you can't remember whether it's a mono or stereo track, because it doesn't really tell you. After you've created it, it leaves you to believe that you knew what you were doing, and there's no way to tell whether it's mono or stereo unless you look at these little circles right here. So just double check whatever you're running, you assign the plugin that is according to whatever this is, mono or stereo. So back to the basics. Created a little compressor, which we'll go over compression and stuff later. But so we got a nice little amp, and we got a compressor on it, ready to go. You have selected your input, and you have armed your recording. The next thing you probably want to do is turn your little monitor on here, this little speaker. What monitor does is if you're running this amp, if you're running guitar direct in, say, let's say it's an electric guitar, and you run it direct into the system, whether it's a direct box or a lot of the little 2-channel interfaces actually have an instrument line in, you're not going to get any sound. You're not going to get anything. This is where the monitor comes into play. You turn that monitor on. It actually looks like it's getting some feed from a channel already. Oh yeah, that would actually be my guitar feed, my direct box. You turn the monitor on, now you're getting live feed. Let's see what we're getting hiss from the amp. If I turn it off, the hiss goes away. Must be hot. Yeah, so if you go down to your fader, here's your volume control. So everything you need is right here to get you going. Now, if you want more detailed control, now remember with monitor, leave it on to record so you can hear yourself. Now, if you go back through to hit play, you're not going to hear anything. Not with this monitor selected. You need to turn that off, and it goes back to where you could actually listen to what you've recorded. So, this little E, this edit channel settings, this is where you can click and get more details. You got your inserts here, which you can still go to and edit and mess around with. But now you got like your detailed channel strips, your detailed EQ. I personally love the Cubase EQ. I'm a huge fan of it. But obviously, if you've got a plugin of your choice where you like the EQs better, great. Over here is your sends. If you're doing any type of side chaining or running like vocal line and you need to send this track to another, like a dub track, then that's what the sends are for. There's all kinds of different uses for the send area. But that is the basics of getting a guitar track or any kind of track, vocal track, anything. That's your basics of getting things ready. As far as recording, this is where you have to do the most important thing. Now, if you're recording music, you need to have your tempo set. So, again, you got a couple different ways to go. You can go to Project, Tempo Track, and you can adjust things here. This is a little difficult. You got to really be used to messing around with this here, which we'll mess with later. I want to do something really simple. You can hit F2, or it might be Command F2 for Command F2 for the Mac, or just F2 on your keyboard, and you'll for Windows, and you'll see this transport bar come up. Or you can go up to Transport, turn it on and off. It's the first option. This little guy here is great to use. First of all, verifying that you have your metronome on. So if I turn it on, turn it off. This is your metronome pre-count. It'll actually give you 8 counts if you decided you want to start from the very beginning, and hit record. Now you have a pre-count, which is great to have if you're kind of squeezing things up here up front. But we're not going to do that. Well, for me, when I have bands recording, I like to give myself about 30 seconds and start from here. Now, I know it's a little weird when you're trying to figure out how long the song is. We'll just subtract 30 seconds from the track. The reason I do this is because you never know when you're going to be surprised and a band walks in and goes, oh, I got this idea we want to do for the intro. We want to make the intro longer and do all these different things. Well, at least now you got 30 seconds of playroom. You'd be amazed. It happens more often than you think. You know, bands or musicians take their tracks home and listen. All of a sudden they got all these cool ideas and they want to, add them. And sometimes it's extending the intro. So instead of having everything right here at absolute 0, and then now you got to try to highlight everything and move it over, and if there's tempo changes, it's going to mess everything up. You have to retune your vocals, and it just becomes a nightmare. So it's kind of a nice little habit to get into. Give yourself about anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute in advance, so that you've got some playroom if you need to. And don't worry for those starting, no, you're not going to have 30 seconds of space at the beginning. And I will show you later how to properly mix a song down where you don't have the 30 seconds of space at the very beginning. This is just blank space that does not have to be there. So the only other thing to get you going, at least, recording scratch tracks or a quick demo, obviously your tempo track. Your tempo is the most important right here. Now, by default, you can't select the tempo. It's set to a dynamic track. You need to set that to fixed track, and you'll see this highlights. Now you can grab and move this up and down, or you can double click and put in the number. So you got all kinds of nice little gadgets here, but that is your most important. Find that tempo, play along, adjust the numbers until it feels just right. You can select right here. Here's where you can highlight and put 6/8 timing, 3/4 timing, or just standard 4/4. Find your tempo, arm your track. If it needs to have the monitor on to hear your amp, great. Turn on your monitor and hit record. Get at it and have some fun. This will conclude this video for part 2. The next video we'll go into even more detailed tools on getting around the interface. There's just so much. There's so much with Cubase. It's fantastic. But we will go from there, and I'll see you in the next video.